Hello, and welcome to a conversation with RIT men's lacrosse head coach Jake Coon, assistant coach Shawn Wilkins, and student athlete Ryan Barnable. We hope that you're all doing well and getting ready for summer. We encourage everyone to connect to the RIT Alumni Association's social media channels, including Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter, where you will find up-to-date communications and opportunities about what's happening at RIT. To view our social media channels, please click the links in the chat box. We are in a campaign to transform the future of RIT. We want to take a moment to thank all those who have helped us reach 80% toward our $1 billion campaign goal. We're nearing the finish line, and all gifts play an important part in reaching that goal. If you would like to be part of transforming the future of RIT, consider supporting the RIT athletics program by giving directly to the men's or women's lacrosse, or becoming a Sentinel Society member by committing a 5-year pledge of a minimum of $1,000 a year to the General Athletic Fund. Those links are now appearing in the chat box. Now, a few housekeeping items to help you enjoy today's presentation. All attendees have joined in mute mode. However, your questions for our panelists can be entered into the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen at any time throughout this discussion. We will make every effort to address all of your comments and questions throughout the webinar. So now on to our main event. Today's panelists include Jake Coon, Shawn Wilkins, Ryan Barnable, and Adam Platzer, who will be our moderator this afternoon. Adam Platzer is a double alumnus, former lacrosse player, and RIT's Assistant Vice President for College Advancement. RIT men's head coach Jake Coon has accomplished more in 11 seasons than what some coaches accomplish in an entire career. In those 11 seasons at RIT, Coon has led the Tigers to an astounding 192-23 record, 10 straight conference titles, 10 trips to the NCAA 3 tournament, and of course to this year's epic win. He has had Shawn Wilkins by his side, who is also joining us today. And last, but definitely not least, we also have current player, captain, and senior Ryan Barnable. He hails from Whitney, Ontario, Canada, is a 3-time Liberty League Offensive Performer of the Week, and jumped through a crowd to tip the ball out of the air into the net for the historic win against Salisbury. He achieved all this while maintaining a minimum GPA of 3.3. This guy, like so many of his teammates, is incredible. And with that, Coach Coon, Shawn, Ryan, and Adam, the audience is all yours.
Thanks, Candy. I will start off with some questions here, but first I just want to reiterate that, Jake and Shawn, they've had an unbelievable career at RIT. Prior to this championship, they've won their conference every year. They've made the NCAA tournament every single year they've coached. So even before this championship, they've done an unbelievable job at RIT. And I think that's worth noting. And they've done it together, the two of them. And the championship, to me, was just the icing on the cake. And Ryan, obviously, you were a humongous part of that. But we're going to start way back before the season even started. And after COVID hit in the spring of 2020 and they canceled the season, tell us what you went through as a team from that exact point through fall ball.
Thanks, Adam. Thank you, Candy. We appreciate you having us on and allowing us to speak to some of our fans and family and alumni. So this should be great. It was like everybody else went through a really trying year. Last spring was, I could let Ryan speak to this, but it was pretty devastating finding out that we were done for the season. And I know I rehashed this on the last webinar, but it was devastating. A lot of tears shed, a lot of not knowing what the future was going to hold, so on and so forth. Luckily, a few weeks after, the NCAA granted the guys a 5th year and gave them their eligibility back. So we went from, kind of thinking that, the season was over and careers were over and whatnot. And then all of a sudden we had some life and some guys were then, kind of put on the spot to decide whether they wanted to come back in return for this season. So that was some incredible news from the NCAA. And I know we got on it right away to find out who maybe wanted to come back for this year. That was part of the kind of weeding through that throughout the course of the summer was part of our job after that spring, finding out who could return and who wanted to return and who was, going to be able to get into school to return or had their 5th year at RIT. So that was a huge part of our summer. We were doing some Zoom sessions with the guys. If you think back, we were playing some kind of fun team building board games over Zoom, which was interesting. We've never done that before, but we weren't able to put on our summer tournaments. We wanted to find a way to get the guys all kind of back together and doing something fun and kind of meet their new teammates as well, the new freshmen. So that was our summer. The guys were trying to lift as well. We put together, Coach Kelly put together a lifting plan for the boys that was more or less a body workout, day-to-day body workout. We didn't have gyms. We didn't have, access to weights and whatnot. So guys were really just kind of on their own trying to figure out how to get bigger, stronger, faster over the summer. So it was interesting. And lastly, what I like to say was that we picked up a couple transfers over that summer, including Larson. We started working on him at that point and ended up pulling Larson in and Max Spahn. So obviously Larson was a key contributor to our success this past year in a lot of ways. And, so that was kind of our off season. I joked yesterday, I also started a garden, which was a lot of fun. And I'd recommend doing that for a lot of people. It's pretty rewarding. So that was our spring to summer. Then we have the fall. I'll speak to that for a minute because I think the fall was really kind of an interesting time for our program. We had no idea what to expect, what was going to happen. We had no locker room. The guys were carrying all of their equipment in their bags to class and then out to practice and changing on the field. And, it was really some interesting times. Along with that, we were in small groups working more or less on stick work and basic stuff, groups of 6, and eventually got up to groups of 10. So the fall was a trying time for us. We ended up getting in, I think it was 16 or 17 practices, which is what we normally would get in, but they were not the same, not even close. Along with that, during that, we had to keep our distance. You had to wear masks, and throughout the course of the spring, that was all the same. The guys had to wear masks every single day in practice throughout the course of practice. And we, trying to keep 60 guys 6 feet apart or 12 feet apart during water breaks was a challenge for us. So the fall was interesting. Obviously the cancellation of the alumni weekend was hard to swallow. We enjoy that weekend and love having the alumni back. So that was tough. And then our fall contest was also canceled. And then we ended short. They cut us short. We never got to a single full team practice in the fall. So interesting times.
Ryan, what was it like from your perspective as a student athlete?
Going back to that day at the Mustang Classic, it was pretty devastating. Like Coach said, that might have been the worst bus ride I've ever experienced. Back from Maryland to RIT, it was pretty eye-opening. And then I wasn't a 5th or a 4th year at the time, but just looking back and seeing all the guys, they just lost their career. And we were fortunate enough to get it back, which was great. And then as soon as we got that information, it looked like the switch was turned on for a lot of guys. And they're just grateful for the chance to play. And we were just going to give it all we could all summer. And then what Coach didn't mention, we broke off into smaller groups all summer over Team Sync, Snapchat, whatever. We got in groups and we're just posting videos of our workouts all summer, keeping guys motivated, keeping guys focused, and just getting better every day. And then we'd come out with weekly tasks, whether it be like max push-ups in a minute, whoever got the highest got points, and we had leaders throughout the summer, mile times, anything we could to get something in. And then some guys were fortunate enough to have gyms at their house. Some guys weren't. Coach Kelly was accommodating for that, being creative. And then, when we got back to campus, it was still pretty crazy. I found out late I was coming back. I had a co-op lined up in Canada, and then it fell through because of COVID. They canceled all their co-op hires. And I was fortunate enough to get a job here, then came back, and then I got the opportunity to practice with the team as limited as it was, but it was something. It was better than nothing. And then guys here grinded when we were here, building gyms in their house, doing anything they could to get in shape and prepare for the season. Just showed the dedication and the want from this group.
Well, let's talk about the season. It starts in 2021. Kind of take us through that. I mean, there was a 2-week delay. There was, in the middle of your season, there was 3 weeks without games due to opposing teams having COVID. I mean, there was a strange time.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ryan. You can start.
In those weeks, coach did a good job keeping it light. We had, I guess you can call them captain's days, but he was out there, but we picked the drills. We bring the speaker out, just have a good time and like just work hard and battle against each other. Because then when that day came, we finally got to play a real team. And some other colors, we just were happy just to go beat up on someone else. So that was good through those weeks. And then, yeah, that was on that one stretch. That was mainly how we got through it.
The beginning of the season was, from that, the break period into January, we really had no idea where we stood. We had no idea if we were going to have a season, what the season would look like. The staff here was working really, really hard to try to piece something together and make a plan, that we could get started with a spring season, but we did not have a go ahead at that point. They were still trying to work through the winter stuff. So very, very much up in the air. The other thing that was up in the air was our schedule. We had a schedule put together, years in advance, or a year in advance anyway, and pretty much threw that in the trash and tried to revamp and start over, and trying to find other schools that could play us. We contacted lots of different schools that could even, they had their own restrictions. So to try to find games was difficult, which is why we ended up playing Fisher twice, which we'll talk about in a minute. But we're doing anything we could to get quality games in. So that was pretty stressful as well. So much uncertainty at the beginning. And then eventually we got to the point where, we have a game plan in place, and, we have a start date, so to speak. And I was pleasantly surprised to find out that we were able to go full team practice right from the start. That was really good news for the staff, especially just because, all of the planning to work through small groups and, creating different types of practice plans and trying to get these guys on the same page was really difficult. So to have the whole team out there was really big. But we were still dealing with the mask wearing, the 6 feet of distance, all of that stuff throughout the course of the beginning of the spring. One thing I was going to mention was, the locker room. We ended up eventually getting the locker room, but I believe we still did not have it for part of the spring. And then eventually, once we did get it, it was a limited capacity in there. So we ended up having to put together groups, of houses, so to speak, to go into the locker room for 15 minutes before practice. So we had to stagger our locker room times every 15 minutes, starting an hour in advance of practice. So, Barney's group might have went in at 1 to 1:15, the next group 1:15 to 1:30, and then 1:30 to 1:45, and then we start practice at 2. So it really ate up a lot of the guys' time. And that was the same for after practice as well. And then we also had to stagger our times in the weight room. So the days we lifted, it was a maximum of 13 in the weight room at a time. And I think we had five separate groups, so they had to wait around after practice to get through their weight, the weight room time. So, I've been called the time bandit before. So I think this year more than ever, we ate up a lot of the guys' time, and it really just showed the commitment level of the guys. But yeah, we were thrilled once we got to 310 March 10th, which was our first game against Naz. Actually, let me back up. We ended up arranging a scrimmage with Hobart, and that was kind of all last minute, and we were kind of surprised to get the go ahead to do that as well. And that was fantastic. We went down, and I remember sitting in the warm ups and watching the guys do their thing, and felt kind of odd or or weird actually to be playing against somebody else. And when we brought it into the huddle, I just said, soak this in and appreciate being here. And it was just a surreal moment. And then we went out and took it to Hobart pretty good, which was a confidence booster for the whole group. But then, rolling out the next week and playing NAS was a great start to the season. And I think the boys played really well. And then it brings us to that Fisher back-to-back game. I know you wanted to ask about that.
Yeah, why don't we let Wilkie talk a little bit about the second Fisher game? Because I mean, you guys you were kind of rolling over people for the most part, but then this game against Fisher, the second game, you guys were like down 5 at halftime, and then the second half, the offense, which Wilkins is in charge of, just turned it up. But what did that game do for your season and your players?
Yeah, offensively, I felt like we didn't have a ton of opportunities in the first half, and we were just trying to, develop some sort of rhythm and flow. And I know we weren't winning faceoffs in the first half, and Walker had struggled, who's a phenomenal goalie for us.
Echoing, guys? Are you getting an echo?
Are you getting an echo, Adam?
Jake, when he talks, just turn your volume off.
Sorry, guys.
The biggest thing for us was just getting possessions. We have a pretty potent offense, and in the week before we had a ton of possessions. Walker played amazing, and our offense is definitely predicated on playing fast, not being afraid to make mistakes, and we just need a chance to get the ball. Including our transition game. Our transition game is predicated on turnovers and saves, and if you don't get those, then a lot of people are like, oh, what's going on with RIT? Well, if you want to play fast and generate a lot of chances and a lot of shot volume, then you definitely need to, create those opportunities, whether it's faceoffs, saves, and turnovers. It's not like you just get the ball, So, I just told our offense, we met at halftime in the huddle, and I said, listen, things aren't going our way right now. I don't know how many saves he had in the first half, but I think it was 9 or 10. And, just keep shooting and stay positive. And I know Barney and the guys were frustrated. And as a group, we just said, listen, we could sit here and worry about what's going on, or we could move on. We're capable. We just played this team 7 days ago and had our way with them. So, really just put our nose down, a little more discipline with our shooting. We didn't change much offensively, really. Just move the ball quicker, a little more accuracy on our passes, and then the ball started falling. That's what's scary about this team. Once the ball starts going to the net, it's kind of a trickle down effect. The defense starts picking it up. The Monty, our faceoff guy, starts winning draws. And, once that happens, this team is very dangerous and tough to stop. That's why, all year we're never out of a game. It doesn't matter how many goals we're down. I think this team can score goals in bunches. And, we kind of showed that in the Fisher game.
Talk to me a little bit about this person, Mindset Mike, and what he did for your season this year. You brought him in to help with the team.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to back up there 1 second, Adam, just to comment on that Fisher scenario. Number one, if you watch the game, we ended up pulling Walker out of the game, and that was probably one of maybe twice in his career that he's ever been pulled out of a game. But Hutchie went in and played great for us and kind of gave us a little bit of a spark. So I think that was huge for us, to see him go in and make some saves for us and give us a little bit of a spark. But after that game, we really kind of sat down and looked at what we were doing defensively and made some changes. Mainly just kind of how much we were pressing out and how much pressure we were putting on our opponents versus, kind of sitting back and playing our angles a little bit. So we made some key adjustments after that game because of that game that I think really helped us down the stretch. you know, playing a team like that twice in a week's period is really difficult. And then, you know, again, later on, we had to do it again with Union back to back. So I think that really kind of prepared us for a situation where, you know, we're in the Liberty League playoffs and have to play Union for a second time, you know, and try to beat them. And, you know, they were one of the toughest opponents we'd seen all year, Union. So that was difficult, but it gave us the confidence to do so. And it certainly really made us reflect on what we were doing, both offensively and defensively in our film session. So it was positive. But yeah, I can chat about Coach Mike for a minute. I'd like Ryan to speak about it as well. But many of you have heard about Coach Mike. Mindset Mike is what he goes by, from Z Winning Mindset. And I think he's picked up a few nicknames since, Magic Mike and a few others, but he's been great for us. He's somebody that I watched present at our coaches convention a few years back in 2019, in the winter of 2019, and decided that, you know, maybe that's something that we need to kind of look at. I felt like our physical piece was there, our skill set piece, the coaching, all of that stuff. And in years past, I felt like there were times when maybe we weren't, we were nervous or scared, or, you know, just weren't in the right mindset to move forward. So I thought hard about it, and we ended up signing on with him in 2020 and started working with him through Zoom sessions in 2020 until, you know, things got canceled. So that's when it all started. To give you an idea of what he does, you know, and again, Ryan can speak to that as well, but he's a mindset coach. He focuses on, you know, what we're focused on. What are we focused on? You know, so we had a ton of Zoom sessions doing some different mindset drills, so to speak. But really, he's working on the guys' confidence, trying to instill confidence in the guys. Really focusing on setting us up for focus on what we can control, versus, you know, worrying about kind of the stuff that we can't, whether it's rankings, whether it's the opponent, whether it's anything really that's other than what, you know, your effort and your attitude on a daily basis. So we really tried to hone that in and focus on what we could control. A big part of it, and something that I really like that he kind of instilled, was just to appreciate and be thankful for what you have. And this year more than ever, I think that was on full display. You know, with COVID, not knowing what was around the corner, you know, every opportunity you had to practice with your brothers or play a game, you know, and it's something that we said every day. We're thankful for the opportunity. Literally every single day in practice, that was said, along with a few other things, some mental talk type stuff that we were doing as a team throughout the year. I really, you know, could relate to that and appreciate that part of it. So, you know, gave us a deeper sense of appreciating what we have. You know, in the end, Mike, in my opinion, really loosened these guys up. You know, I don't think the coaching staff, you know, if you know me well enough, I'm a pretty tight guy and try to keep things pretty businesslike. And towards the end of the year, he really got us loosened up, and we were doing some really cool stuff throughout the course of the playoffs to get these guys playing at a high level. We had a whole Christmas theme going on that he sparked for us. That was the whole principle is that, you know, game day was Christmas, you know, like Christmas Day. We kind of focused on the Tufts game, really was kind of Christmas Day, and that week leading up to Tufts was, you know, kind of that week leading up to Christmas, and he kind of related it to all that. And so for some of the guys I coached early on in our career, Coach and I, you know, playing music at practice was never a thing. So we were playing, you know, all kinds of Christmas music throughout practice leading up to that weekend, and you know, trying to keep the guys as loose as possible. And I think, you know, rolling out and beating Colorado, and then obviously Tufts, you know, the guys bought into that, and I certainly learned that, you know, this may be the way to go. so we rolled with it and, stuck with that whole concept throughout the course of the playoffs. And Barney, any comments to any of that stuff to Coach Mike?
Yeah, he basically he made us like grateful for the opportunity, you'd say, and then I'm aggressive and relentless. I have no fear of failure, and I never give up. And that was just what we'd say every practice before the practice. And then I think we all bought into that. Like there'd be 3 feet of snow, no one would care. Like we were just all happy to be there. We could be in our basements at home in quarantine playing Xbox, but we're out there playing lacrosse with all our boys. It was really fun. And then everyone was just really happy to be there. Like the 5th year guys, like it was just, they were literally fortunate to be there that they got their year back. Everyone was really excited to be at practice all the time. It felt like a lot of different energy due to that. And then basically the mindset he'd prepare you for is like every game's the same game. It's just, you're just out there to showcase your abilities. It's not a game. You're out there to show the world what you can do, kind of thing. And then I think that helped our minds going into bigger games for some guys who maybe get nervous before on the big stage or in a big game with a lot of importance hanging on those games. And yeah, like even after the finals, a lot of the guys were like, didn't even realize, like we won, obviously we're all excited, but like some guys were still like, couldn't believe it was the championship because they were just treating it like we were playing an inter squad at the campus, like that kind of mindset. I think that helped us a lot with jitters, which sometimes we've gotten in holes in the past. And I think we were sharp off the get-go this year, and I think it helped us a lot.
Great. Well, you mentioned a little bit about the Tufts game and the Colorado game, but let's talk about the NCAA tournament. So you get the overall #1 seed, and it's kind of a different format, and I'm guessing it's because of COVID. The games used to be like Wednesday and then the weekend, and now they were Saturday, Sunday, like back-to-back games, 2 weekends in a row. So talk us through the tournament and obviously the Tufts game, which was kind of a big redemption game for you.
Yeah, I'm going to back up again. Sorry, Adam, keep cutting you off there, but I did want to just talk about the middle of the season as well. We had a point, and Ryan talked about it a little bit earlier. We had a point where we ended up with a 3-week break, 3 weeks of game being canceled. And that kind of put us to the test. Trying to keep these guys engaged for 3 weeks was difficult. And none of those cancellations were due to our guys. They were due to the opponents, having a COVID case or whatnot. So all those, I think it was 3 games ended up being canceled, and we were trying to find new games and just, we couldn't find anything to make it up. So keeping these guys kind of engaged was important. So that whole mindset piece kind of comes back into play. And again, we tried to, loosen up. We did a few inter-squad scrimmages. We also were trying, to keep our guys healthy during that period of time. We had after about 2 weeks of it, we realized that, maybe we're a little more beat up than we want to be rolling into the postseason or the end of the year. So we had to gear back a little bit. And I think that one of the biggest positives that came out of that was the fact that we were just kind of able to work on ourselves in the middle of the year, and versus maybe focusing on, a game preparation or an opponent. We really kind of worked back to our 6-on-6 stuff, and I think it helped us in the long run. It was pretty terrible to go through that period of time. We also had one case, and we had a house quarantine during that period of time as well. Kind of, it almost worked out. It was 2 of our starting defensemen in the house, and a defensive midfielder who played for us quite a bit, and a few others. And the timing actually worked out fairly well, that they had to do their quarantine during that period of time. So they didn't miss any games. So it worked out well. And then we ended up with a second case leading into the Liberty League playoffs, which was quite scary. Just not knowing if the school was going to shut us down after we had a couple cases, but they did the tracing and ended up being just the house. And, so that house, unfortunately, was was not able to participate in the Liberty League playoffs, which was terrible for them. You know, but again, all built character for our group. We had to figure it out and find a way. But you know, the Liberty League playoffs itself, I touched on the Union game a little bit. Was playing them in the first round was interesting. They were the best team, the next best team anyway, that we felt. And we had to play them in the first round of the Liberty League playoffs. So it was thrown right to the Wolves right away, but the guys handled it well. And I think we ended up winning by 2 in that game. And we might've been down in that game as well and had to come back. So a few games throughout the course of the year, we were down and had to fight our way back. And that resiliency and that thick skin, I think, again, helped us, you know, in the championship game. So just wanted to kind of talk about that break we had in the middle of the season. It was trying on the guys. I mean, just imagine playing, you know, a game or 2 games every week, and then next thing you know, you're practicing for 3 straight weeks. I'm sure Barney could comment that it was not necessarily the most fun. And we found out the games were canceled, 2 of them the night before the game. So it was, you know, you do everything to lead up to the game. You do all your scout work, you're prepped, you're ready to go. And then all of a sudden the rug's pulled out from under you. So interesting times. So yeah, you're talking about the championship. That's what you asked me, Adam?
I was just talking through the playoffs, the new format, and definitely, I mean, the Tufts game was one of the biggest highlights and a huge win, obviously, for the program.
Yeah, so the playoff format was changed before COVID, just to keep everyone up to speed on that. The new pod system was something that we were going to have to do in 2020 anyway. So, you know, to have a game on Saturday, game on Sunday, and then gear back up the next weekend and do the same for the quarterfinals and semifinals is how it was going to be anyway. And it will be how it will be moving forward. So COVID was not the reason for that. That was something that the NCAA had put in place in 2020. And that's something that will continue to be like that moving forward. The interesting part of it all this year was the hosting piece. Moving forward, the higher seeds will host. And that's how it would have been last year as well. But this year it was completely different. Because of COVID, they had to implement testing and whatnot. And they wanted to have sites set ahead of time. So schools were bidding on hosting rights, and then they would choose who could host. So, you know, it's the reason we went to Stockton University down in New Jersey for that first round. You know, we weren't able to host that weekend due to COVID and our graduation. So, you know, we had to go to a kind of a neutral site and play there. So that was the interesting part. Luckily, RIT stepped up. The NCAA was begging us to host the quarters and the semis, and RIT stepped up and took the bid. And you know, I think that was a huge part in beating Tufts in particular. If we would have had to play them on a neutral site or at their place, you know, you just never know how that's going to go. So to be home, that weekend was really incredible. It was the first time we had fans at the field. You know, there were some fans at Stockton, but it really was kind of limited. The game at Cortland and Stockton was great because we were on the road and we had our first road trip of the year. So that was kind of fun. But the game at home was pretty intense. I'm not sure I've been in a more intense environment than that Tufts game for a playoff game or a regular season game. The guys were really amped up. The crowd was fired up, and it just felt incredible to be in that environment again. We hadn't had that all season. So I think everyone, my concern was that we were going to overlook Colorado College. I think a lot of people were talking about the Tufts RIT matchup, and you know, we certainly have some history there. So my concern, maybe Shawn wasn't as worried, but I was a little worried we'd overlook Colorado College, but the guys came out and took care of business. And it was a great game. And then the Tufts game again was gratifying on many fronts. I know a lot of former players of ours ended their season playing Tufts. So I know they have a pretty good interest in us beating them. And it probably felt really good. I know for our team, it was an incredible day. Obviously, to beat them to head to the national championship, it was a special day for all of us. I'll let these guys chat a little bit about their.
Yeah, why doesn't Wilkins talk a little bit about the Tufts game? Because you guys were down 4 or 5, and then you rattled off 10 goals in a row, basically. I mean, the offense just picked it up.
Yeah, anytime you play Tufts, they're very, very, very similar to the way we play. They play fast, they play hard. They're going to put you in situations where you're going to be down by 5, and it's kind of a roller coaster game. Every time we've played them, it's been like that. And over history, they usually have a third quarter run, and they kind of run away with it. So I think a lot of people, and Barney can touch on this after I talk, but, I look back at the Fisher game, being down 5 and being down 9-5 with 6 minutes left in the second quarter. This team just didn't care. There was no panic. There was no like, uh-oh moment or guys yelling at each other, and that's history. That's normally the case as guys start getting frustrated. And this group just kept plugging, and it wasn't like, we weren't playing well. They're just a very, very good team. And they made us pay for a lot of mistakes. And every time we turned the ball over, they scored. So, we started making plays in the second quarter. We scored 4 or 5 straight to tie it up 9-9. And then basically as coaches, when we were talking at halftime, and these guys, I give them credit. The seniors kind of steered the ship, and Barney and the rest of our captains, at halftime, there was no panic. They were just like, we're just going to keep playing our brand of lacrosse and not playing Tufts brand. And, me and Coach Moss and Cooner just talked and said, if we just eliminate their transition and their early offense, we're going to win this game. And really, they couldn't beat us 6-on-6. Tufts has always had a, kind of a freelance defense, slide quick. And our team is very predicated on ball movement and, sharing the ball, and it doesn't matter who's going to score. We're just going to get it done. And, that's not an easy offense to buy into, but a lot of these guys buy into that system, or just share the ball, get the one mores, make the easy looks, be unselfish. Barney probably wasn't a ton on the score sheet, but he probably had 3 or 4 hockey assists. He was initiating and creating, right? And we just kept grinding, and we went up 15-10. I was like, there's no way we're going to lose this game. I saw panic on their sideline, and it just, these guys just kept going and kept going and kept going. And it was a pretty great game. It was a lot of fans haven't been to a game in a long time, and you could feel the energy. It was like, holy smokes, it's been almost 2 years since you heard this many people on RIT's turf. And it was amazing. There's people in tears after the game, and I think it was just the emotion of not only the game, but just being involved again in some sort of normalcy. And just a unique situation. In 2 weeks, a lot of things happened. And but the great thing is, I credit these guys. Their mindset didn't change. They stayed disciplined. Even though things opened up, these guys, Barney wore a mask, even though he, a lot of guys outside didn't have to wear one, just to be safe. So, there's a lot of guys that were, extremely unselfish and thought team first that entire process. And I thought you saw that in the Tufts game. Everybody contributed. Not one person, including our bench, including our guys on the sideline. It was just a great team win.
Well, let's get into the championship game. you're going up against the Seagulls of Salisbury, and you played them in the championship a couple years prior, and they beat us. But you talk about like the mindset of your team and not being nervous, like seeing the difference between the game against Salisbury a couple years ago and this game. It was a completely different team. Everybody just seemed more relaxed, and obviously the game was a classic, went into double overtime. Just talk us through that, and then we'll get into Ryan's goal as well.
Yeah, we kept that theme going all week after the Tufts game. A couple key things happened that week. In the week before, I'll just comment on one thing. The week before, we lost a family member the week before the Tufts game. It was a really difficult week emotionally, and we talked a lot about that in the locker room, and supporting our teammate through this, and so on and so forth. So that was a really difficult thing to kind of process during that time. But I also think in a lot of ways it gave us some strength moving forward, in more of a sense of togetherness than ever. And I think back to right at the end of the Tufts game when we're all celebrating, Tanner's roommate, one of the guys who didn't dress, had his phone out and had Tanner FaceTiming in our huddle while we were celebrating, and that was a really, really awesome moment to show our support for him, and just kind of showed, he had enough sense to kind of think about his teammate in that moment and bring him along with us. So pretty emotional week for sure. And then moving into the next week, on the other side of things, Coach Moss had his first child, and again, I mentioned this stuff because I think it's obviously life-changing stuff, and was certainly a part of our process and our journey. So congrats to Coach Moss on that, and everybody's doing great now, but certainly kind of got some momentum going the other direction as well. So that week leading up to Salisbury was a really great week. Some team meals, some things that people may not know is the game day morning. I'm sorry, I'll back up. We had our Friday practice in the stadium, and it was a miserable kind of couple days there, as everybody knows. But we had our practice in the stadium Friday evening, and we were warming up. The guys finished their stretch, and they were doing some line drills, and I could hear some faint music in the background. And I went over to the table, and it was just our team in there, and there was only a few other people in the whole stadium, but I could hear that music in the background. So I went over to the guy and I said, "Hey, who's running the music?" And he's like, "I don't know, I can find out." And I'm like, "Well, can you play some Christmas music for us?" So next thing you know, we're in the stadium rocking out to all kinds of Christmas music. I mean, blaring over the stadium with just our team in there. So pretty cool moment, pretty fun. Just went along with that whole Christmas theme. And I think it loosened the guys up a bit right away. And then game day, to not bore you with all the other stuff that went on, but game day, I thought, again, I took notes from Coach Mike, and he had talked about doing a kind of a planned or a scheduled distraction before the game. So the guys, the whole team went to Dave & Buster's the morning of the championship, and we spent an hour at Dave & Buster's playing video games and just having fun, and trying to get our minds kind of off of the national championship. And again, Ryan can probably speak to it, but I do think that had a huge impact on why the guys were playing loose throughout the course of the championship game. Stuff like that was huge for us. But the game itself was incredible, back and forth. It was really a street fight. We knew that both teams were pretty equal, very different styles. But it was a street fight. It was back and forth. And, it was nice to see that we came out strong. But in the past championships, we've had we had a strong start in 13, and then we had a poor start in 13 and then had a strong middle and then a poor end. And then against Salisbury in 17, it was a tough third period and finish. So it was just really nice to put together a full complete game and even some bonus time in there, which was quite stressful. But you know what I'll say is guys were making plays all over the field. They weren't afraid to make plays. They were taking chances. They were playing, to the game plan, but also improvising, and I'm sure Coach Ryan will talk about improvising on that final game, on that final goal. But it was just nice to see the guys go out and play loose and not get rattled or worried at all, no matter what the situation was. And I think the close games and the comebacks throughout the season helped us. And I think Coach Mike really helped us with that. And then, certainly great leadership from the guys and great buy-in from the guys. All of that really kind of propelled us through, that 60 plus minutes. Then I'll let Ryan talk about the second overtime, but if we're going to bring it up, I'm really happy that Ryan scored that game winner. He had a tough finish to the end of the regulation when we gave the ball back to Salisbury and, caught a little bit of a break. So I know he was beating himself up pretty good about that. He slipped and fell. I mean, what do you do? But then to come back and score the game winner, certainly a twist of events there. And I also think it's pretty ironic that our leading goal scorer fed our leading assist man for the goal. Typically you wouldn't see that, but it worked out great. Ryan, you want to talk about that game winner?
Yeah, I'll go back to the Friday night though at the
Yeah,
stadium.
sure.
I think that night was like all the edge the boys needed. I don't know if you guys have heard, but Salisbury refused to practice on the grass because it was raining, and like that just fueled the boys. Like we were saying some things about them that I'm not going to repeat, but like it was pretty motivating because we thought we had the edge just right off the get-go. And then moving in through that weekend, all the guys were relaxed. It was nice to have team meals with the guys for once. It's been used to take them for granted. And it was just nice to be with everyone eating in the hall. And then moving into Sunday, I think that distraction really had a big impact on a lot of the guys for when they got out there, especially guys that maybe don't get as many runs. They were all up all the time. And then when they got their call, they went in there and didn't panic, took care of business. But moving into that game, like Coach said, there was plays being made all over the field. Jensen was just an animal and nailer. All our LSMs were running around, making great plays in the midfield. Like all our wing play was great. Monty did hit his thing, and Quinn had a great game. And then moving into that last goal, it was kind of just it was just a great pass by Dawson. It was like right on my ear. And then I was just fortunate enough to bury it. And then, but moving past that, if like, as Coach was saying about winks, like you go look at our team picture, like, I don't know about a lot of the guys, but my eyes are drawn right to Jensen's holding his phone or whatever. And then it's Winks and his jersey right behind him. Like, it's just speaks volumes about this group and how much we all care about each other. And just how the leadership in this team was just second to none.
But I heard that during that play of the game-winning goal, you were acting like you were fixing your elbow pad. Is that true? To kind of lull your defender to sleep? Did that happen?
It was pouring rain. The thing was slipping down all game, but yeah, it definitely helped. Yeah, I do that all the time. Just kind of like before a slip or anything, I'll just pull my arm guard up or just look somewhere else and then cut just to maybe get the guy not paying attention or something. I just got the couple inches I needed, and then I was lucky to finish it. So, good thing.
Good work. Anything else you guys want to talk about for that game?
If Shawn wants to, just let me know. But what I will say is just after the facts, very emotional, clearly. But I people crying, people fired up. I know somebody tried to storm the field and got kicked out. I mean, pretty awesome stuff. But you know, the support beyond, and I've said this before, the support beyond the team and is just incredible. You know, starting with Mr. Spiatti, you know, he's been a constant supporter of men's lacrosse here, and certainly a supporter of mine from the time I've arrived, and our staff. But to see him as emotional as he was a pretty awesome thing. You know, the celebration was fantastic, and really the win itself was for, you know, everybody. I hope everyone felt it, and I hope everyone felt like they were a part of it, because they were. You know, certainly the guys on the field made the plays, but the fact that we are where we are at this point is a buildup of a lot of people putting in a lot of work and energy and time and sacrifice and so on. And this year was on full display with all of that. The sacrifice these guys made it was second to none. Pretty incredible. But yeah, the post game was awesome, fantastic. Hopefully, I'm sure Ryan will talk about this moving forward, but I think in a lot of ways this game was motivating for our team. I'm not sure that there's a sense of being satisfied at this point. I think a lot of our guys, you know, working through our post game meetings and end of the year exit interviews, seems like a lot of guys are probably more motivated than they've ever been. So that's a positive, and I'm excited to get rolling for this next year.
Well, why don't we talk about next year and what's coming up? And, you know, there's some people that have another year they can come back, and they got to make a decision on that. But what's the outlook for next year?
We feel good, you know, about who we have coming back. We return a lot of our offense. You know, we're losing a couple key guys down at attack, and then one midfielder with Matt Wickers. So we're losing, you know, 3 guys, but we're returning a good core group of guys. And we have some guys that, you know, kind of have been pushing for starting time anyway. So those guys will hopefully get an opportunity to get out there and display what they can do. Yeah, so we're trying to convince a couple of these 6th-year guys to come back. There's a few maybes in there, but for the most part, Ryan's class, most of them are all returning. So you know, we've got a real solid group of 5th-year returners, you know, with a lot of talent in the group. I think our biggest challenge is going to be replacing 3 starting close defensemen. Those guys are all moving on, and obviously Walker will be a tough replace, but we're pretty confident that Hutchie can jump in and do a great job and fill his shoes. So I think finding a couple guys, and we have a few that are certainly ready to go to jump into that starting defensive role and do a good job for us. You know, not only that, we've had great energy around some transfer interests. So we'll see if, you know, anything happens with that. There's a lot of guys in the portal that have expressed some interest. So we'll see what happens there. And then we have a great, you know, what we think is a real solid incoming class. Some guys from all over the country that are going to come in and hopefully push for time. That we'll determine that as we go. It's, as we know, always tough to come in as a freshman to get on the field, but hopefully they come in and push themselves, push their teammates. So yeah, that's what I have. Anything from you guys? You want to go, Will?
Sure.
You're good.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about, you know, us moving forward. I think just the energy these guys had and the sacrifices they made this year. You know, Barney touched on it a bunch. We had our first, full team meal the night before the championship. We called a couple places. Nobody accommodates 70 guys, and we got into some steakhouse, you know, last minute. You know, they said that we could take us, and probably because it was pouring rain and no one wanted to go out. But you know, just sitting down at that team meal, it felt great to have a team meal with the whole team. It was the only one of the year, and you know, I want to go back on it, but I'll touch on the game-winning play. You know, we did run one play, Blue Jay, that won the Fisher game. And, you know, it was so loud in that stadium, you couldn't really hear much. And I think after that, I said, hey, if Blue Jay doesn't work, you guys got to figure it out. You know, it's too loud. Who wants to make a play and who wants to be a champion today? And you know, these guys, they improvise, they did their own thing. I mean, it's just great players doing their thing. For next year, offensively, I think we're going to score some goals. Like Coach said, we you know, we got some holes to fill, but I feel good about the situation we're in. There's a lot of guys chomping at the bit to get some playing time, and you know, that now they got a taste of it. I think those guys are even more motivated than ever. I hope they are. And hopefully those guys can step up and fill some holes. And there's no reason why this team can't win another championship next year.
What do you think about next year, Ryan?
I think we're just going to build off the momentum from last year. We're going to focus on a lot of things we did that we felt were positive and helped and worked. Now we were saying when we got back and did our team meeting at the end, we're usually like sitting around questioning, like, what do we need to do to fix? And now we kind of have like a blueprint laid out. Like, we're confident we know we can do it. And we kind of have a format to go rely on and then to base our moves off of. But for this off season, I think we're going to do like what we did last year, jump into our small groups with some senior leadership and then make the freshmen feel welcome coming in, get them on the same page with the lifting program, skill stuff, whatever we can to try and get everyone engaged and accountable. And then hopefully we'll build into this fall and we'll have a full fall, which is going to be awesome. Haven't had that in 2 years. So we'll get everyone going. And I think a lot of the seniors want to get some extra like inter squads going in like by ourselves in the fall through captain's practices and stuff. So we're going to try and keep everyone the stick in the hand and excited for the spring.
That's great. Well, we have a couple questions in the chat here. If we have time.
Yeah, no, I'll answer a couple quick ones. The clean look, no.
Okay.
That will come and go. I'm not soft. I have not gone soft. I think I've gotten smarter with old age. That's how I'll phrase that one. Yeah, any other ones that are relevant? Adam?
Yeah. Well, there is one about it. We're going to have a new athletic director. Lou's done an unbelievable job. He's been here a long time. He was sent out on a high note by this championship, which was fantastic. But we're going to have a new athletic director who starts in a couple of weeks here. I mean, what do you think about that, Jake?
Yeah. Well, like I said earlier, Lou's been around for 46 years at RIT. So it's a huge change. It's sad to see Lou go. I mean, honestly, he's become a mentor and a friend, and you know, it's going to be different. No matter what, it wouldn't matter who we were bringing in. It's going to be different. I do feel that Jackie will do a good job for us. You know, I was fortunate enough to be on that committee, so I got a little bit of a idea of what she's all about. But at the same time, we don't know. It's you know, we're going to kind of work through it with her. We're going to meet with her throughout the course of the summer here, get some time to spend with her and see kind of how she works and what makes her tick and what she's expecting from us. And you know, we'll do what we need to do. But you know, ultimately, it's not going to change what we're doing. You know, in terms of our team and our recruiting efforts and you know, all the events that we will like to pull off. I mean, hopefully she'll be as supportive as Lou throughout the process, but it'll be a learning experience for all of us. You know, at the same time, you know, sometimes they say change is a positive thing, and you know, a little bit of new blood in there, and you know, maybe there's some things that we can do a little differently that are on the positive side of things. And I hope she brings that to the table. She's a former athlete and you know, Division I athlete, and I think gets that part of things. So that's exciting. We'll see. We have a lot going on here with some new facilities. You know, right now the The grass fields out front are tore up. There's dirt everywhere. And pretty soon the stadium is going to get ripped up and some turf and lights put down. So, and some buildings after that. So in terms of all of that stuff, we'll be working with her directly to help us through that process as well. So yeah, exciting times.
There's a question from Sarah Burke about championship gear. I mean, I know there is T-shirts on the Barnes & Noble website you can order. That's the only thing right now, but I don't know if there's anything else coming.
So yeah, this has been kind of an ongoing thing. So basically Barnes & Noble won the rights to sell that T-shirt. I've been talking with Scott McVeigh. Ad Pro is kind of a dealer that we work with directly, and we're hoping that we can get a hat and some other apparel out there to folks, either through Ad Pro or through the RIT bookstore. So once that happens, we are going to send an email and a link, or however we do it. Maybe it's on our fall apparel sale. But we will get some stuff out there. I know you should be striking while the iron's hot, so to speak, but we're working on that. I'm not sure it was communicated awfully well. And there was a little bit of a hiccup with who had the rights, so to speak. So yeah, we're working through that now. We'll get it out to you.
Okay. I think we'll just ask this final question from John Foley, former goalie at RIT. What was the difference from, I mean, you won a championship at Nazareth in '97, and then you won this one as a coach. What's kind of difference there?
Maturity level. I was a freshman in college at the time, and that was an incredible experience. Doing the pylon and playing in the game, and just being a freshman in that environment in general was pretty overwhelming. But I think this one's pretty sweet because, I've been working hard for, 25 plus years since then to win another one. So for me, all that time spent, all that effort put in, all the hard work, so on and so forth, has built up over a long period of time. So for me, it was pretty special. My kids were there. My kids were pretty emotional about it. So in terms of, motivating them, I think it was a great experience for our kids, along with Shawn's, just to do it for all of RIT and the RIT community and the Rochester community. I can appreciate all of that now more than I could as a freshman in college. It was certainly pretty awesome as a player, but as a college coach, you get a much better sense of, who it affects and how special it really is.
That's great. Well, I think if there's anything else anybody else wants to say, we'll end it there. But congrats to the three of you. Fantastic year. And I think we're looking forward to next year. It just seems like the momentum's there and it's going to keep going, and the players are ready to go. So thanks for your time. Candy, did you want to chime in the end here?
No, I just want to say, thank you, Coach Coon and Coach Shawn and Ryan, Adam, this is great. This is the first time I've ever been on one, so this is really exciting. And to our interpreter, Elisa Suple, and to the production services student, Connor Makrowitz, for helping out today. And coaches, congratulations on your recent victory, and wish you well for next season. And most importantly, thank you to all the 100 people who signed up for today's event. It was great. So with that, have a wonderful rest of the week. Stay healthy, stay connected, and help us transform RIT.
Thank you all very much.